So we're studying tonight, Chapter 3, The Path of Individual Salvation. We travel the Hinayana path to become sane, to become tranquil and peaceful, and to stop any actions that might cause harm to others. We learn the path from our experience. Intellectual understanding plays a part in it, but conceptual knowledge that's not also felt as resonating in our own lives is not particularly helpful. We learn from our actual experience that arises from practicing discipline and meditation. Discipline here has a very different flavor than our traditional connotations of something harsh and punishing. Here, discipline is trusting in oneself. You're trusting in your dignity and wholesomeness, your own basic goodness. Meditation is practicing this trust in a meditative way, embodying the trust, connecting our lives to the path. Then intellectual understanding expresses what has been trusted and practiced. It makes explicit our experiences from practicing discipline and meditation. And all three types of these learnings work together. There becomes an actual embodied connection to the teachings. And what we begin to learn from our practice is how the world works. We begin to see the 4 marks of view. These marks are qualities, aspects of reality. The first 2 marks, impermanence and suffering, describe our everyday world, the samsaric world from a Buddhist point of view. The second 2 marks, egolessness and peace, they're more like possibilities or potentialities, glimpses that might arise as we examine the world through the practice of discipline, meditation, and knowledge. And when we examine our world, we discover the impermanence of all things, the first mark. Whatever arises also ends. It's a basic and natural process. Trungpa describes this as whatever is collected is dispersed, and whatever comes into existence is subject to dissolution. The creation of something is at the same time the creation of its dissolution into something else or into nothingness. And all the happenings of the universe are subject to decay. We operate as if this isn't so. We strive to build, to surround ourselves with situations we can count on that will stay unchanged. COVID has given us all a huge lesson on the possibility of doing that. Plans? What plans? We are intimately learning uncertainty and rapid change as we just try to go about our everyday lives. In these times, the reality of impermanence smacks us in the face. And whatever we strive to build, to create, that becomes the source of our suffering if we deny the fact of its impermanence. This is the second mark of the view, the second fact of life in samsaric world, that of suffering. There is pain in every human existence. pain in being born, pain in getting sick, pain in aging and in dying. And then there's our suffering attached to our view of our circumstances. We now have so many aspects of life that are changed that we assumed wouldn't. If we had created a comfortable situation and expected it to continue indefinitely for long as we wanted it, we suffer at its natural change and decay. On a more subtle level, our suffering arises not just from perceived or anticipated losses, but from the trying to get certainty, the trying for predictability, the illusion that we could make our circumstances resolve into a steady, certain, permanent happiness. That is what causes us to suffer. The third mark is of egolessness, or free from the fixation of ego. What does that mean? Well, the sky, the earth, everything in our samsaric world are regarded as projections, not truly existing in a permanent way. Even the very firm belief we have of the existence of a centralized self, a thing called me, the hero of our stories, the narrator of our internal dialogues, the Dharma of self or individuality, is illusionary. The state of mind that perceives the world as being made up of solid, permanent things. It's an attempt to make a manageable world out of reality, but in actuality, it leads to our suffering because it just isn't so. This means that in fact, there is nothing for us to hold on to. That attempting to hold on to what does not truly exist is what cuts us, makes us unhappy. Trungpa Rinpoche once told his students, according to John, that there's good news and bad news, or in this case, bad news and good news. The bad news is that you are falling, nothing to hold on to. The good news is that there's no ground. There's no real substance to our projections, so there's no real substance to our suffering as well. We can hold on to the drama in our lives for entertainment or distraction, but with meditation practice, there's the growing possibility of holding those situations a little lighter. There's the potential to loosen our allegiance to the view of the drama as quite so solid, quite so much as truth. This loosening of our perceptions of this reality, they might be experienced at first as a kind of hollowness, a sense of hollowness in the things in our world and ourselves. But this experience of hollowness is leading us onto the beginnings of the path of egolessness, the beginnings of freedom from fixation of ego. It's called that because there is no ego, no self in reality, no perceiver to receive these perceptions of our many projections of sky, earth, and everything we perceive as a thing. Trungpa says, egolessness is not a tremendous revelation. It's simply the realization that there's no landing platform in our whole being. Freedom from this viewpoint of ego gives the experience of peace. That's the fourth mark of the Buddhist view. Trungpa defines peace as having nothing to do with pleasure. Peace is just simply peace. It's non-aggression. Nothing takes place. We simply quiet down, and doing so, things become very clear. And this definition too, which I love. Peace refers to an absence of chaos. If suffering is caused by holding on to what does not truly exist, through holding fast to our expectations, our beliefs about our everyday world, the suffering Trungpa calls the pain of fixation. Peace arises when we cut through or let go of those expectations. It's like we're holding a very sharp knife by the blade. Our expectations only continue to cut us for as long as we insist on holding the knife. And we want to keep holding the knife because we think we can protect ourselves with it. But it's the holding of the sharpness of the blade that's causing us the injury to begin with. For example, when something or some relationship in our lives end before we want it to, the deepest cuts come from fighting against the fact of its ending, the impermanence we don't want to accept. Clarity that something we saw as good or even great is still subject to the impermanence of existence, that it still has an ending, that this is its ending, as it turns out, can bring peace. In a similar way, our attempts to build ourselves up as unique and special become the blade that cuts us. We are already enough, just as we are. Our Buddha nature is already here. We can give up the struggle to be perceived as a good person, a talent, a financial success, someone special in our own eyes and in the eyes of the world. We just don't have to struggle that much. That is peace. Trungpa says we are constantly trying to cover up, constantly putting on an act, and therefore we have problems. But when we begin to realize the nature of that covering up, that trying to be somebody, we see that the myself that we're trying to be is something quite horrendous. And realizing we don't have to go through all that, there's tremendous relief. We can actually be ourselves at peace. The dropping of the struggle requires an intention or an ambition to do so. But the process of that dropping is natural and simple. We begin to notice that being peaceful with whatever arises doesn't require continual effort or fuel to maintain, unlike our struggles to prop up or solidify the ego. It's like we've been driving up a mountain, having to keep stopping to fill up our gas tank. Whereas riding down the other side with egolessness, we don't even have to put our foot on the gas pedal. We are living in the gap between our pre-COVID reality and what new comes that replaces it. Going through this time gives us all a vivid, intense experience of impermanence. Suffering comes when something ends, which for all intents and purposes, we had not even conceived of as having an ending. It's not the actual loss or change that creates our most intense and persistent suffering. It's the feeling, that sense, that this should not be so. Suffering comes from the trying to get away from the actual experience of the loss or change. It comes from the sense that if we just came up with the proper argument or plan or strategy, that pain could be bypassed. Suffering comes from the wanting that our loved one, our lifestyle, our youth, our vacation plans could come back to us and spare us the pain of being with their loss. It comes from the denial that the loss or change has even occurred. And it's the illusion that we could reinstate what went before. All that is when suffering comes. Impermanence does not have to mean suffering. We could know this from our own experience of our innate intelligence as COVID survivors. The inner intelligence we've relied on as we have become experts in pivoting, and improvising, and creating Plan B. Experts in dropping non-essentials to rise to the challenge of surviving. And somehow we've become more flexible, more creative, more resourceful. There is the view of egolessness, that there is no perceiver who has to be built up or protected. No one we have to impress. There is just life, unfolding, constricting and expanding, delivering pleasant and unpleasant experiences. As Pema Chodron, a famous student of Trungpa Rinpoche, has suggested, we could grow our capacity to be with reality, letting our nervous systems become better able to be with unpleasant emotion, just as it is, without trying to run away from it with distractions or denial. Just recognize what is here. Seeing a glimpse of reality where things arise and pass away. Nothing wrong in that, nothing that threatens, nothing for our nervous systems to get all wigged out over. Holding our pain in a larger, expansive container of just what is. Then that's when we could become, as Pema puts it, collaborators with our reality. And with the stripping away of our pre-COVID lives, our habitual, comfortable circumstances, there could also be things in your life that you would say are permanent. And I welcome any other questions or comments as well. Any ways in which all of this resonates with you or
Laura, I think our connection is, Laura, I think your connection faded out. You
it's
froze.
unstable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now I was just inviting people. I was just wondering what people's experience of impermanence is. If they feel like, yeah, there are things in my life that are permanent, or just any comments that this might you might have about this, ways that it fits for you, ways it doesn't. Just opening up the floor.
Laura?
I'd like to make a comment, if that's okay.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Rika. Nice to meet all of you.
Hi.
Hi. So the way I'm experiencing impermanence is I'm kind of up against my desire for stability and knowing in the face of my daughters who are starting to look at colleges, and they are twins, so they're going to be leaving at the same time.
Oh.
So I think I'm aware, and I'm watching myself hold on to drama. I'm watching myself hold on to expectation and really getting into the weeds of the whole college experience and, you know, the right college and, you know, all of the stuff about it. And I can tell just by how you were talking, if all of that is made up, then I'm doing that on purpose to ground myself in something that is self. And what would it look like if I can get glimpses of just being aware that there's only the moment and all the drama and all the worry is made up and everything will be taken care of.
Wow, thank you. That's a wonderful example of impermanence, right? The change in your life, a parent, we spend years, and then to have both of them go at the same time, that's change. And then I heard you talk about awareness, that you could really get lost in the weeds and that could even be serving you a purpose.
Yeah, I mean, there's, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, it's, I mean, just so much of what you said kind of pointed to me creating this on purpose. It's so I use my family, the roles, my daughters, my husband, to keep me from feeling that we have no platform. So it's kind of mind-blowing, really, if I think about that. And it will be interesting to see, how I rubber band back into, oh my God, I can't,
Yeah.
There's always that, like, you get a glimmer of something new and something new inside of you. And then there's that rubber band effect where there's a part that's just like, don't know this. You shouldn't be thinking about this. This is not where you need to be going. So anyway, I feel like I'm good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Laura?
Yes.
This is Dean.
Hi.
Thank you so much for what you said. And when you were talking about COVID and what life has been like the last 7-8 months, what really resonated with my struggles to understand people who do things that I would think everybody ought to realize are not only not in their best interest, but not in the best interest of everyone else. And thinking about that in terms of their grasping for the life they used to have, or for the things that used to give them comfort that they've been denied for some time, it makes it a lot easier to understand. It doesn't help me accept what seems to me as really destructive and selfish behavior, but it at least helps me to understand why, because you know, I certainly feel those same things too. I wish I could see my daughter. I haven't seen her in, you know, 7 months. And,
Oh,
you know, I would love to go back to my office and see my coworkers. I'd love
yeah.
to go to the movies.
Yeah.
I'd love to go to the mall. I don't need to buy anything. I just want to walk around and look at stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That was really helpful to me.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Laura,
Yeah.
my name's Roberta. Thank you so much for the teaching.
Hi, Roberta.
I, in the last 7 months, have been able to accept what we and I have been going through.
Mhm.
But I am absolutely terrified by the story, not only my own story, but the story I see being created of the possibilities of suffering that lie in the future.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So you've been able to be with what all these changes. You've been able to do that, but you're noticing the extreme suffering that arises out of this. You point out it's a story right now. We don't know, right? Yeah, and just noticing the tremendous impact of that on you. Yeah,
A dread.
yeah.
I have something I'd like to ask about.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much about impermanence, or maybe it is, but I have a few questions on the reading, but I'll only focus on one. In the part where it says we're constantly trying to cover up or constantly putting on an act, I guess that sentence where it says we see that the myself we are trying to be is something quite horrendous.
Yeah.
Is it, this is a theme I kind of go back to, but is it basically saying, because farther down you read about giving up the struggle. So was it really about just giving up the struggle of striving to be maybe more enlightened or a better person? Is that really what it's saying? Because I don't feel, I don't know if I'd be taking this class if I didn't feel the need to be maybe a kinder, more grateful, I don't know, more, just
Yeah.
as a person. So I find yeah, so that I have the big question mark there. I kind of find it interesting because, well, I don't need to repeat myself, but I don't know if I find that constantly putting on an act. I don't know. I find that I'm not putting on an act. I'm trying to, yeah, just trying to
Well,
be.
isn't it a good thing to try to become a good person?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yet
Yeah.
saying to accept who you are. And so I guess who I am is trying to be a better person, but maybe it's the trying. Again,
Yeah.
that whole idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trying.
Yeah. It's sort of a paradox, right?
Yeah,
That this idea, it seems like good intentions. I mean, we started the talk by saying, I was saying we're on the path because we want to become peaceful and tranquil and not harm other people.
Right. Yeah.
And it's in the it's in the subtle rejection of what is when we're trying to improve it.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
That who we are right now is good enough.
Good enough. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to, it's Jane.
We can't hear you, Jane.
Okay, is this any better?
Maybe.
Yes.
Okay, so if Roberta doesn't mind, I feel your last comment, this feeling of dread. I'm not clear, or I don't know if you want to go any further in where that comes from or what the fear is. We're terrified.
I'd like to say something.
Please, yeah, I think it was important. Yeah.
The fear has to do with the fear of egolessness, that we're afraid that I doesn't exist, that I is not going to be safe, solid, sane, sound, all those good things that we want. And that very fear is the stuff of I. What I is fundamentally, from a Buddhist perspective, is the fear that it doesn't exist, because in fact it doesn't. That's the assertion that is being made with the doctrine of egolessness. It's saying that what I is just a fiction, a story that we tell from time to time, and it has within it its own demise. It's already dying as it's told. And that when the truth of egolessness is experienced, then the individual, each one of us, emerges, ironically, much more vividly in our own uniqueness. Because when we try to be an I, it's a concept. We have ideas about what we need to be: good, bad, holy, profane, smart, dumb, loved, popular. And these blur us. They turn us into concepts. But the idea of egolessness is that when we come completely present, when we drop this fear, the fear of our own existence, the fear of our own inexistence, of our own deaths, then we can emerge as we truly are, each one of us so unique, vivid, colorful, full of qualities and care. And the whole thing devolves around the ability to come present. The fear lies when we get lost in thought, lost in contemplation. And it's always a contemplation of wishing things were different, of wishing things were otherwise. That's the very nature of I. I is constantly trying to improve something. That's what I's job is to make things better according to some idea. What's being offered in the latter part of this chapter, where he talks about becoming one with the Dharma and the possibilities of freedom and joy, is that when we drop these preconceptions that we have about who we are, what we need to be, where we're going, what the world has to be, when we come present to the world as it arises and passes in this present moment, then we can actually be here for the world. He says at one point that he's spent his life constantly feeling that he was in the service of others. And frankly, having known him, I feel that that's an accurate statement. Most of us, when we talk to other people, we're listening to what they say, and then we're going inside and seeing, what can I say? What can I say in response? The example I give is you're standing in front of someone, they say, well, I just came back from Italy. And you say, oh, I was in Italy 3 months ago. It's self-reference. But the state of mind that he's describing would not say that. It would say, why did you go to Italy? What happened there? What did you like and what did you not like? It would be a curiosity, a constant going out, an exploration of the world around us. It's an act of curiosity, of awake awareness, and of generosity too. And when we become involved in helping the people around us, like your daughters, who was it? I'm sorry, I can't see. Who was speaking about their daughters, their twins?
Me,
Yeah,
Rika.
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 Rika. And it's like when we have this preconception about our children, about what we are afraid they're going to be, what we want them to be, then we live in a world of fear and manipulation. And it can get quite heavy-handed. But when we are delighting in them, when we are celebrating them and encouraging them and helping them to discover their place in the world, things go very differently. And I'm not trying to preach or be moralistic about this here. It's simply a different orientation. It's the orientation of being helpful, of being constantly helpful to others. And that this is part of awakened mind, of giving up the egotism, of constantly being worried about me and how I'm doing and where I'm going and whether or not this makes sense for me. And this isn't moralistic. The act of meditation is a constant act of seeing that and then coming back into awareness of the present moment, which is a tremendous act of generosity. It's part of why when we do the breathing meditation, we're breathing out. We're giving out. It's an act of generosity, of giving out. And our awareness goes out and it's here in the space of this present moment. He talks about, towards the end of this chapter, he's talking about how we can be at peace. And the funny thing is, he says that peace, you see, it all resides in this awareness of the present moment. And he says this takes ambition to be at peace. But at the same time, it is very simple and natural because wakefulness is not an effort. It's not an effort because it's what we are. The effort comes when we want things to be different. This is ego's job of constantly trying to improve one thing or another. And then he says, the only effort needed is to give up that struggle. Liberation, and that produces liberation, which is very delightful. And this is the same thing that happens in meditation. When we struggle, for instance, to get rid of our thoughts, our meditation becomes warfare. But when we just see them and see our minds and the world around us as we bring our meditation into our daily lives, we could be constantly going out, constantly being generous. And that brings great happiness, that kind of generosity. He talks about the possibilities of freedom and joy. Here again, he says, just in terms of your sitting meditation, when the gong strikes and you begin your meditation practice, notions of ought or ought not, should or shouldn't, notions of punishment or of being a good boy or girl automatically begin to come up. You need to let go of such notions. You have to become completely ordinary and not associate what you are doing with religion. Holding on to religion produces guilt, negativity, and no joy in being a practitioner of that religion or of the Buddha Dharma. So really, this whole path is one of coming present for this world, of embracing this world, and of being generous to this world. There's an old saw, if you want to have a happy life, be generous and be kind to others. And if you want to be miserable, you pursue your own self-benefit. A friend of mine said that. These three marks of existence, impermanence, suffering, egolessness, those are the three core marks. And then sometimes nirvana or peace is added on as a fourth, as it is here. But the three core ones are egolessness, that I is just a fiction created. It's what I is the constant desire for self-improvement. We are the hero or the heroine in our story of our struggle for self-improvement, for improvement of the world, or what we want, whatever it is we want. And this produces suffering, tremendous suffering. The suffering of wishing things were different. Lack of joy in the way things arise in the present. But we could have that joy. We can come back to it. This is what our meditation practice is all about. Impermanence. There is a, Trungpa Rinpoche had a great friend in the early part of his visit here in 1970, 71, Suzuki Roshi, the master of Zen Center. And a student of Roshi's, David Chadwick, wrote a biography of Roshi. Trungpa Rinpoche felt Roshi was a great Buddhist and a wonderful teacher, and he loved him very much. Chadwick describes sitting around with Roshi one day and fatuously, somewhat asking him if he could sum up the essence of Buddhism in just a word or two. Roshi answered and surprised David, everything changes. Everything is changing in the present moment. And that not only means that we can't hold on to things, but it means that we can be present here in such a light-handed way, such an awake way for that change as it's happening, as it's unfolding continually in the present. Ego wants to hold on to things and make them permanent, but it can't do it. It's just not possible. And so we're constantly being enjoined to come into this present moment, and beyond that, to be of help, to be of use, to fall in love with this life, and to be a friend and lover and helper for everyone around us. So that's kind of my last half of this chapter. That's what I got. He talks about in this last section, he says, the last section is called Possibilities of Freedom and Joy. And I want to tell you that the further one goes on the path and listens to the descriptions of the path, the more the idea of freedom and joy become prominent. In the beginning, it's really about escape from suffering. But in the end, it's all about freedom and joy. And it's the joy of this present moment. The beauty of it is it arises so impermanent. You see, here's one thing you should know about impermanence. There are really two ways to take it. The first way is, your car gets old and dies, your body, changes, you lose your hair on the top of your head, if you're a guy like me, and you get wrinkles and everything starts going wrong. Things disintegrate. We know that everything that we're looking at has a half-life and is disintegrating. Even if we can't see it disintegrating, it is, right? That's one version of impermanence. The second version of impermanence is this, that in this present moment, right now, nothing stays the same for even an instant. These words come out of my mouth, and as they do, they're dying. They're turning into space, silence. This gesture, you turn your head. The world is a constant presentation, visual, auditory, all the five senses, and mind. The mind is continually churning out thoughts that don't last as soon as they appear, they're dying. And this is the true version of what impermanence is in the mind of meditation. We learn to live in this awake, constantly changing, four-dimensional, because there's the three directions in time. It's like we're in the middle of this movie. And the more we come present for it, the more vivid, beautiful, and communicative it can be. And this is what the Vajrayana, the advanced teachings, are all about. The extraordinary meaningfulness of this world as it arises and tells us what it is in the present moment. It communicates with vividness and with heat, which they call compassion in the teachings. So these 3, 4 marks of existence, sometimes they're 3, sometimes they're 4. This is core Buddhist doctrine, but it goes very, very deep. So that's what I have to say for the moment. And again, we could have more discussion for the time we have left, which is a little while, a few minutes.
I have a question in the same section as the book Trungpa talks about egolessness, and it's page 15. There's paragraph after paragraph about suffering, and the last line of the last sentence is, altogether this mark qualifies the previous statement on suffering in that there is no substance to suffering at all. And there's a way I love that idea, but I'm kind of playing with it or struggling with it and trying to figure out how the two can both exist at the same time, suffering and no suffering.
Suffering and non-suffering?
Suffering and suffering having no substance. If we just he's just talked about the goal of egolessness is to end suffering because we suffer all the time because of our egos.
Yeah. And the question in there is what?
So how can we say that there is no substance to suffering at all?
Well, because there is nothing that endures, even for an instant. It's a constant flow in which nothing stays the same for any length of time. But ego, the suffering of ego, is that ego wants to hold on to it as though you could freeze it, but you can't. Everything is changing. Everything becomes something other than we wanted it to be, in great degree or little, small degrees. And that's suffering. That produces the suffering. As long as we continue to hold on, as long as we continue to try and keep it the same according to some idea, which is what ego is all about. Ego is all about a conceptualization of I and other and their relationship. This is why Buddhism is non-theistic. Theism has the idea that there's something out there that I can relate to, I here. And what Buddhism is saying is, I doesn't exist. So how can you even talk about this I-other relationship? It's funny.
Danielle had a question, I think.
I did. Part of it was what Jane was just talking about, but in response to like physical suffering that continues a long time, like with cancer and stuff. But another of my question was with egolessness was like, it was saying that there is nothing there, no receiver, and everything just goes down the hole. And my conception or my thinking about Buddha nature kind of melds with the thing about like quantum reality and consciousness of the universe, and like us being the conscious universe, really just experiencing itself, and that we're born into this body that makes up an ego to experience the world. So my thinking is that like the Buddha nature or the consciousness of who we really are is kind of like the frequency, and our brain is kind of like the receptor, the radio, that's kind of like interpreting life for the universe. Like we're part of the universe experiencing itself, but in our bodies, which our brain has the ego apparatus that's making this whole thing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, yeah.
No. You?
No?
No, I think it's quite brilliant what you're saying.
Good.
No, I connect it with like Deepak Chopra, the conscious universe, and then I connect it to, the How to Change Your Mind, that book by, I forget his name. And he's realizing through scientific studies that the ego is actually, they're pinpointing the part of the brain that is our ego, which is called like the default mode network or something.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm going off topic, you could just let me know.
Yeah.
I am going off topic.
No, you're not.
I just feel like there's something, we are there. We are a part of something. And I'm just new to this. So I don't know like how, if there's nothing there and we die, how can you be reborn if there's like a spark inside us? Like, I don't understand. Like, things are happening.
Let's just take one thing, a little thing at a time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
Sorry.
you covered the whole universe here.
Sorry about that.
I think the talk has been great.
Yeah. What was the last thing you said? I'm sorry.
The suffering part with the physicality of suffering, being in like suffering pain, and then you're trying to like just be okay with it, but it's painful,
Mm-hmm. Well, what these teachings are telling us is that we've made a mistake. We made a mistake in that it's like we're in the middle of the universe right here, and it's all flowing around us. Colors and shapes and sounds and tastes and thoughts and everything, they're all arising and passing away in this space, which is the universe. It's this little section of it anyhow. And then suddenly, in the midst of that, we concretize something. Something emerges from this mix, this flow, as though it exists, but it doesn't. As though it has a separate existence, even though it's just a part of the continually changing flow. And that thing out there implies the existence of a seer, a perceiver here, me. And suddenly we're in this I-other relationship. And this is really the essence of ego, is this idea that there's an I and an other, and the two are in relationship. It's only a statement, a story that's told in a moment. But it has tremendous implications, because the fact is, it's like any story, it has a beginning and an end. It's dying. So as soon as we're aware of me, there's this feeling of my insubstantiality, my impermanence, my, what's going to make me safe and sound and sane and happy. And there's that fear that we're going to become unsafe, unsound, impermanent, disappear. And so we struggle to try and constantly reinforce our sense of well-being, existence. And that is the struggle of suffering. And that is the struggle of ego. And it's unnecessary. It can be dropped. And then there is no I or other, but there is a constant responsiveness with the universe as it arises and passes away in this present moment. And that's what's being described as well. The absence of that struggle, that constant struggle to assert one's own existence and well-being, the absence of that is the nirvana. That's the peace. There's a lot more beyond that, but that's a good start for peace, for an absence of suffering. And the only way, there are two ways that you can approach this. One is you can listen to these words and other words and get convinced that it logically makes sense by your experience. That's one way. That's sort of the intellectual way to come to the understanding of egolessness. The other way to come to it is through meditation practice. Because every time each one of us comes completely present, lets go of thoughts, and is aware of this moment as it arises in the present, ego is gone. Ego is like a secondary comment. Trungpa Rinpoche used to call it the watcher, or he used to call it the hitchhiker. ego. It's sitting on your shoulder and it's saying, look at that. That's good. That's bad. Don't do that. Do this. It's like a commentator catching a ride. So you've got two of you. There's the one who's living the life, and then there's this voice that's making a commentary. That's the ego. Every time you come present in meditation, you let that watcher go. It evaporates. It's just a voice. And it evaporates, and you're completely here, completely present, and you can experience egolessness in that way more and more in your meditation practice. So these two ways to come to this rather difficult idea. One is through study and intellectual conviction, that this actually makes sense intellectually. And the other is experientially, by coming present in your meditation practice. Tony.
John.
Oops, we got different Tonys. Okay, we'll come back to you, Tony. Yep.
This one or me or this Tony? Okay. I particularly liked reading today. It really meant a lot when he talked about you do not separate what is Dharma from what is not Dharma. Just bringing everything to the path, really. He is putting on your socks, washing your face, combing your hair, going to the toilet, whatever you do. So whatever you're doing, the path of Dharma goes along without a break. That meant a lot to me today, particularly in terms of the fact that the reading from the internet today was another quote from Trungpa Rinpoche when he said that ultimately the definition of bravery is not being afraid of yourself. And those two things that I read today really resonated together, to bring everything to the path, to not discriminate, and to be brave, you know, to be who you really are in this life and in this world. So that's my 2 cents for the evening. Thank you very much, John, and the other teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. And I'll give you another one to add on to that. Someone asked him once, what is the purpose of fear? And he answered, the purpose of fear is to prove that I exists.
Yeah.
That's the same idea. Tony Powell.
Hi, thank you everyone for everything that you're offering. I am struggling with the concept of egolessness, and while I'm listening to you talk, and you're talking about, even Trungpa Rinpoche said in the section about peace, that what you come to begin with, we find out who we are. I feel like I might be over intellectualizing this, but if the purpose is to be curious and a good friend and a lover and to find out who you are, isn't all of that also the ego? Am I still not trapped in the concept of myself?
Well, there's two versions, you might say, of who we are. One is the idea, full of qualities of what we would hope to be and what we criticize ourselves for being or not being, and praise ourselves for being or not being. The other is that as each one of us is so unique and vivid in the way in which we present, and this becomes, as we become more and more awake and aware and present, that vividness of our qualities becomes more and more powerful. This is the enlightened version. When you get to the Vajrayana, which is the last and sort of ultimate stage of the Buddhist teachings, they talk about things presenting themselves in their natural and most vivid qualities. This is the organization of the mandala, It's the reason that Tantric Buddhism is so colorful and vivid in its iconography. It's that everything is speaking what it is very, very clearly and loudly when one has the clarity of mind, the lack of egotism to see it. Ego just obscures it. Ego is always engaged in thoughts of wanting it to be this way or that way, of wishing it were otherwise, wishing it was this way, wishing it was that way, intending to make it so. We're just constantly engaged in the machinations of ego as we walk down the street. Sometimes you walk down the street, one does, and you're barely here. You could walk right by the store you were planning to go to because we're so lost in some dream. So waking up, coming back to the present, the world becomes much more vivid and communicative. And that vividness is described in Tantric Buddhism and in terms of the organization of the mandala. And we'll get to that at some point. When we get to the third volume of these thick volumes, we'll get to that too, the organization of the mandala into the 5 Buddha families, they're called. And each one of us has very unique qualities, but they're organizable. And we can describe each other. That'll be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Eileen has a question, I think.
I just wanted to thank you so much. Everything that you said, John, and I forgot the other lady's name, is completely resonating with me. And it just totally makes sense that if I accept everything just as it is, and I drop the storyline of, I like that, I don't like that, that's good, that's bad. Why isn't it this? Why? If I let go of all of that, I could be happy. I could have peace. I could be good in the face of everything that's going on. So I'm just so into this, and I love it. It's so great. If all I have to do is accept everything, except that my favorite store closed, that my favorite restaurant closed, my favorite macrobiotic restaurant that was on the Upper West Side for 30 years is gone, and Suen in the village is gone after 30 years. Like, I have to accept that nothing is permanent, that just because that restaurant was there for 30 years, it's not there anymore. So there's so much peace to have when you stop struggling with that you don't like what is, you know, that if I just have acceptance and impermanence and life is good. So thank you so much for that. And the other thing is, this is very interesting. I hired a coach to come to my professional group tomorrow. And the exercise that he does with our group is that you are meeting somebody new and you are not allowed to talk about yourself for 4 minutes. All you do is ask them about themselves.
Terrific.
And no matter what they say, you are not talking about yourself. And I've done this with colleagues, and they can't control themselves. They can't not talk about themselves. And it's so brilliant because you are being with somebody when you don't have to do exactly like, where'd you go on vacation? Yes, I was in Italy too. Isn't it great? No, it's not about my trip to Italy. I'm here about your trip to Italy. So anyway, tomorrow night is exactly what you're talking about. He's going to teach my professional group of attorneys and accountants and financial people how to actually be a good listener, how to be a better person, how to be someone you want to do business with.
Absolutely.
Can't wait.
Yeah, when I was first taking training and coaching, they talk about 3 types of listening. And this applies to all of us in our lives. As soon as when I began to hear this and some other things, I decided I was going to take the training. You know, I was on the fence. And the 3 levels of listening are The first one is self-referential. Guy says, or the person you're talking to says, I just came back from Italy. And you said, oh, I was in Italy 3 months ago. That's self-referential listening. You know, it's not really listening. It's bouncing. The second level is two lovers sitting across a candlelit table, and they're just totally focused on each other. This is the level of shamatha meditation, one-pointed focus in the present moment on an object of awareness. The third level of listening is that you are 360 degrees. You're aware of the person or the thing that you're listening to in time and space, and you're completely open and aware and curious and receptive. And that's really Vipassana meditation, which is what we do here at the beginning of the class. So these three levels of listening, aren't they wonderful? And when you get to that Vipassana meditation, it is producing egolessness. Because when the person is really aware of what is going on around them in the present moment, thoughts of I arise not at all or less. I is always I, you know, it's self-referential. That's terrific though. But thank you, Eileen.
Thank you. That's good. What a great night.
There's
Kurt has his electronic hand up.
I did that.
Meg just showed me how to put up an electric hand. But yeah, they comes up for me, and it actually came up strong with Roberta and what she had mentioned about the future. And so I want to bring up that idea of accepting things as they are. But what about changing the way things are becoming and taking that that active role rather than a passive role? And I guess, just from my own experience, when I'm in a deeply creative space, that pure creative space in an artistic mode, that feels when my ego drops away. I'm not doing it for me or gratification or whatnot. It's flowing through, and it seems to be in the betterment or in service of a larger vision or whatever I want to call it. And at the same time, it is that I, that me, that's trying to change things because I want them to be different than they are now into the future. And I'm just wondering what you could speak of that idea.
There are three virtues that we're going to come to in the next book. But they're already here too. The three virtues that develop as one goes deeper and deeper into this, and they are: one, clear seeing, that we begin to see the world as it really is, instead of as we hope it and fear it to be. That veil, that it's like sunglasses, is removed, and the world emerges much, much more clearly and vividly. They call this prajna, and it was mentioned tonight in its ultimate form, and in the chapter when they talked about the three disciplines, or three, shila, discipline, samadhi, and prajna, which is knowledge. That's the first thing that begins to happen in meditation, is that we begin to develop prajna, the ability to see things as they are, not as we hope and wish them they were, but as they truly are, and as they truly are very vivid. The second aspect that begins to develop is compassion. And compassion is not a feeling sorry for. Compassion is a love for, a resonance with, and an ability to communicate openly with. So when one begins to drop the machinations, the schemes of ego, which are always about changing things according to some plan, some scheme, to make them better according to that scheme. And when one begins to drop that and see things as they really are, then there is a heat and a love and an open communication that begins to develop. And that's called, for lack of a better word in translating it, compassion. The term in Tibetan is nyingje. In Sanskrit, it's karuna. And it's usually translated into English as compassion, sometimes as resonance or communication. The third quality, though, is really what you're talking about. And this is the hardest one to come to. It comes the last. And it's called upaya in Sanskrit. It means skillful means. And what it refers to is the fact that when you begin to see the world as it truly is, with an open and communicative heart, then you can respond and interact with it in a way that furthers those qualities of true seeing and openness and compassion. And that's called skillful means. That's the way upaya is translated. And you can begin to be very responsive and skillful in your response to the world, in bringing the world into this awakened, enlightened mind. And I think that's what you were talking about.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Yeah, it's right on. It's touched that feeling. You know, there is that feeling of resonance and ego dropping away and being of service. That just is, I guess, that's what I strive for as an artist, to have those glimpses of those moments. And it's thank you for that definition, or that explanation.
That third quality, the skillful means, is really a service, as you just used that word. That one is serving the world. And Trungpa Rinpoche said it in this thing, that he felt he was living his whole life in the service of others. I felt that he was too. I remember sitting with him at parties and watching one person after the next come up and want to talk to him about, you know, I just lost my job, my relationship with my lover is terrible, you know, I'm so depressed. And he just sitting there and saying, constant, never a reference to himself, what's going on with you? You know, how can I help? It's amazing. I felt that he was that way 24/7. It was an example of what each one of us can be. Well, friend,
Dan,
good. Okay.
I think, Dan has his electronic hand up.
Okay, Dan.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Dan.
I mean, unless we're going over, I mean, we are going over, so yeah, I don't want to keep anyway. But you know, what comes up for me is this way of looking at ego. There's a lot of similarities, or maybe it's the same, to addictions. The ego is an addiction, it seems like, right? And since it's an addiction, the constant need for thought, the constant need to see things as they are, can never be satiated, right? It can never be satiated, but you're still constantly craving it, you know, craving the permanence, you know. And when you don't get to, you know, things don't get to be as you want them to be, and they just are as they are, you experience a kind of an uncomfortable feeling, like not dissimilar to withdrawal, you know, and it constantly has to be fed. I don't know, just thinking about it.
Would you tell people what you do for a living, Dan?
I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've been going in to work every day. I work at half of my work is at a skilled nursing facility. So, you know, I'm dealing all the time. I mean, I'm dealing all the time with it personally, but I'm dealing with it all the time with people who are, their physical being is, they're being confronted all the time with the impermanence of their physical being. And right now they're dealing all the time with things really not being the way they want it to be. You know? So a man yesterday who I've been seeing for a few years, who before COVID, his daughter would pick him up 3 or 4 times a week. They'd go out to lunch. Now he hasn't had one visitor, his daughter, his grandchildren, since March 13th. So things are really not the way he wants it to be. And then on a personal level, I work with recovery a lot and addictions, which is, I guess, why it was, I just said all that.
Yeah. And really, what these teachings are telling us is that the only way is that you can't attack the problem and try and cure the problem. You know, like if you are lonely, get more people to come and visit. The answer really has to be in coming present for your own mind and giving up the struggle and the wish that things were otherwise. Because there's always going to be that kind of suffering, one way or the other. And look at, I mean, you know, as we age, I've got people dying all around me, and I'm watching my own body, you know, turn and turn old. It's really interesting. And the Buddhist teachings say, old age, sickness, and death. This is what we can expect. And if you don't want it, it's going to be really miserable.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with your friend, with your client.
Yeah.
And wishing that he could see his progeny. The very wish is itself a torture. The wish that things were otherwise. We do a practice that some of you have already received instruction in. It's a compassion practice. And it's called Tonglen, called sending and taking. And we'll teach it one of these days in the meditation period before I'll give a teaching on it, how you do it. It's a contemplation practice. You're relieving someone of suffering and sending out to them happiness. And really what you're relieving them of is you can't relieve them of their cancer or of their loss of a loved one or of their broken limb or whatever it might be. But what you can relieve them of, you can help them with, is their desire, their wish that things were otherwise. That is the real suffering. And the Buddhist teachings constantly talk about people who have realized these teachings, who go into the worst circumstances with cheer, confidence, intelligence, and compassion. Anybody have anything else that's burning before we wrap up? Yes. Emilia? No?
Valerie, what were you going to say?
You're muted, Val. Can't hear you.
We still can't hear you.
Maybe it's time to say goodnight.
I think it is. Everybody, so next week is chapter 4. And if you have any questions, please email me. And if you want to discuss your practice, you can email us too. Barry and I are available. Nothing is more important than practice. So we ask for donations, but really the biggest gift that you can give is the gift of your meditation practice and study. But study is good, study is great. Meditation practice is the best.
Yes.
That's where you actualize it. And as Trungpa Rinpoche used to tell us over and over again, just do it. It works. So we'll dedicate the merit. This is a thing that Buddhists do. It's an act of generosity, which is so helpful. And it's by giving away the merit that is earned during this session, where actually the irony is that you actually, whoops, maybe I'm not going to be doing this. I'm sorry, folks. Let me see if I can get it. That by giving away the benefit, you're giving away your ego. Here we go. Can everybody see this? The dedication of merit?
No,
No? All right, I'm going to do it once more.
You're sharing something else.
Sorry.
I can get it up pretty quickly.
All right, if this doesn't work, I'll let you do it. How's
Okay,
that? You got
that's
it?
good, John. Yes.
That's it.
Here we go. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. It's wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you so
If I
much.
can be of any service to anyone individually, please contact me.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank
Thank you,
Thank you,
John.
John.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, John.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
I know that's right. That applies to
Bye.
Laura and Barry as well.
Yeah.
Take care.
John,
Thanks
Barry,
again.
Laura.
Very, Laura.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a
You
good
are
weekend.
so very welcome.
Thank you, Laura, for doing a great job. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good talk, Laura.
Really good. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Night.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. Bye, all. Yes.